it. And OU and Texas have, I think, made it very clear in their statements that there is some juice to this. So,
okay, why today? A&M was on the podium today. SEC Media Days. Big 12's had theirs, right? Wednesday and Thursday. Why today? Is that part of the deal? Because, well, it's a pretty good time to get attention. The SEC media is meeting in Hoover, Alabama with all the teams that are there.
I mean, I don't think there's any doubt there is some timing that is going on that is not entirely coincidental. I mean, I don't think that they just so happened to drop during SEC Media Days and the rumors about the SEC and these two massive programs moving there. So, yeah, I think that was very intentional. I don't know really what it does because I think you could have dropped this at any time. But I think it's intentional because to have that information out there when all of these bigwigs in the SEC are gathered around, I think that's interesting. And it's allowing for a lot of them to actually comment on this story as it's being talked about. So I kind of like the timing of it because we've been able to hear all these, power brokers, whether it be at A&M, get their, immediate reactions to it. But, man, tonight after, like, the last media session or whatever the schedule is out there at SEC Media Days is over with, those restaurants, those bars where they all get together afterwards and talk business and talk, storylines and whatnot, I'd pay to be there tonight. I'd pay to be in, was it still in Hoover?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. I'd pay to be at that Hoover Hotel to just listen in on some of those conversations going on. It'd be really interesting.
Eric, one of the things, Eric Carr, who's an Oklahoma fan, he was talking about this, and a lot of people are going at each other, which is what happens with the internet, media, message boards, talk shows as well. From Brandon, at least if you're Oklahoma and Texas, you would get better home games with the SEC. Matthew, Oklahoma and Texas are going to have the tough time in the SEC against Bama, LSU, Florida, Georgia, maybe even A&M and Auburn. One of the things I saw was that Texas is 3-1 in their last 4 games against SEC teams. Those have been one-time deals, and that's not to take away, hey, they beat Georgia and hammered them that game. I remember that bowl game, no matter what Georgia said afterwards. Playing somebody in a singular game, in a bowl game with preparation, or even a non-conference game, or whoever it might be, is a little bit different when you're having to play that schedule back to back to back. For example, TCU was one of the teams that ran the Mountain West, and then it was called something else as well, and they've had success. I mean, 2014, they should have been in the playoff. Baylor should have been in the playoff. Both of them could have been in the playoff, and they've had some other teams that have been pretty good. But when you start to have to play that schedule week in and week out, it's more difficult. It can also make you better and help you recruit better, no doubt.
We've seen A&M have that little bit of an adjustment process, and, they had Johnny Mania that broke right away, so you kind of almost covered up some of the issues that they still had to address to be a legitimate year in and year out team. They're there now. Like, now they're there. It took them 3-4 years to get there. They had to build up the D-line and the O-line and, get certain types of athletes. But, yeah, there was certainly an adjustment period. But, I think some people will, based on just, reading various opinions out there, there's some fans, like if you're a program like Oklahoma where, yeah, it's fun winning the Big 12 every year and basically going, 8-1 every year in the conference, and that's all great. But, hey, what about, though, going to, instead of Manhattan and Ames and Waco and Lubbock, we could be going to Georgia and Alabama and Auburn and all these other places. Newness attracts people. New, and new trips and new all that. Now, you don't necessarily take into account initially how much more all those trips are going to cost or how much your team might suffer as a result of it. And if, you might have to resort to going from being the kings of a conference to being kind of middle of the road potentially. So there's a lot to like about it that I totally get, but there's also some downfalls to it as well.
And look, this move is about revenue. Sports is about football.
It's all about money.
It's about money. But you do, sometimes you got to think about some of the money you're going to lose because of the non-revenue sports, because you have to stay in hotels a night longer because you're flying a longer distance, or you have to, you have longer flights and all those different things. You got to take into account, if you're Oklahoma and you have to fly all of a sudden to, Knoxville and Gainesville and
they've played in Knoxville before.
Yeah, but you have to do it in the middle of the week for the volleyball team and the tennis team and all that stuff. It changes things a little bit.
Well, I got a couple things here. For one, I've seen a lot of people bring up this point, and I think this is valid, and it's a changing world. Like, we used to be far more absorbed with what's going on domestically, and now with the internet as big as it has become, it's a global world now, right? Like we're all attached. It's not just like, hey, what's going on in America is all we're really worried about. But one of the things that a lot of people attribute their love of college football to is the regionality of it. And we've seen that start to kind of go to the wayside a little bit here and there.
The college football playoff, having basically the same teams every year since it began, has kind of given that a little bit of a staleness.
Yeah, it has. But, that regionality, if this move were to be made, I mean, this wouldn't be regional matchups. Oklahoma and Florida or Oklahoma and Georgia, they're not in the same region. I mean, I guess you could throw a big old blanket over it. But for those who like the regionality and the close rivalries and that kind of stuff, the history and tradition, I mean, this would burn all that up, pretty much. So that would be one negative, if that's something that matters to you. But if you're a Texas fan or an Oklahoma fan, you might say, screw it. We played all these teams
forever,
for decades, and we don't care about being regional with the schools around us. We just want to be worldwide. And I don't think there's any doubt that Texas would have no problem with that, and I don't think Oklahoma would have a problem with that either. But for longtime fans who do like that aspect, it does seem to, between NIL, expanded playoff, potential conference movement, that the college football that we knew is changing in some ways for the good. Like the NIL stuff is good, but I think it's also kind of losing some of its actual, the things that really drew people to it originally.
The games, for example, A&M in Texas has been gone now for a decade. Nebraska, OU, they're playing again for the next couple of years, but that's been gone for almost what seems like about a decade. Yeah. UCLA, USC. Now, that was a big game at the end of the year. It still is maybe for them. Army-Navy will always be Army-Navy, no matter what, because that's a national game because of what they represent. But, yeah, a lot of the regional rivalries, even if they're not in the same conference, have all just kind of become just other games.
So if
I'm not saying there's not things they're playing for, like pride, whatever, right, a bucket, but it has kind of been diminished a little bit.
Yeah, so like if you're Oklahoma, are you going to still play Oklahoma State? You say that, but if you're playing, 10 SEC games or 9 SEC games, you really want to add a potentially good Oklahoma State team to Auburn, Bama, LSU, A&M, whoever's in your division, So, either you do and your schedule's just, you have no off weeks basically, or that rivalry dies, like A&M and Texas has, and then we just talk about it for 20 years and why it should still be played even though we know it's not going to be played. But then again, maybe it reignites A&M and Texas, and so you lose one, you gain one. I don't know, but certainly the way we know it and the way we have known it is changing immensely, especially if something like this does go through. And by the way, Ross Dillinger did mention in the SEC bylaws that to extend an invitation to expand, they need 11 yes votes out of the 14 teams. So that's just a note on what it would take to actually extend an offer.
And
so A&M's so they need 11 or 13 basically.
So I saw somebody tweet out, maybe it was Gabe Bach, and he said, if A&M's argument is that they like being the only team in the SEC in their state, then they have a really good, they have at least a good pool of, look, Kentucky is the only SEC team in their state, and Florida and Georgia and LSU. And so there's some teams they could say.
Kentucky.
Yeah, so they're all there in the only SEC team in their state. So maybe they say, like, well, hey, look, you guys made this argument. Florida, you made this argument several years ago. What's changed now?
It's always
they've
something.
But they've got Auburn, Alabama, and that's what this would be. A&M and Texas. It'd be the Texas equivalent of Auburn, Alabama.
The Egg Bowl.
Yeah, but I know what you're trying to say there, and yeah, money changes everything, Paul. Mm-hmm. That's what it all comes back to. We can talk about hurt feelings or whatever the case may be. All this boils down to is money, and Oklahoma and Texas can't help but see the changing landscape and see the money that could be made. And even though it might mean a lesser record every year, even though it might mean tougher recruiting, even though it might mean, less road trips for the fans to be able to afford, either way, it's still more money, and that would be the pull for them. And, there's also a lot of other things that are beneficial, being a part of the SEC. All
right. When we come back, we'll have Paul's top 5. Here's a story of the Olympic Games just kind of subtly have started. The United States women's soccer team had won 44 consecutive matches. Dating back, like, my goodness, it's been a while. They were the tournament favorite, world ranked number 1, and beaten by Sweden 3-0. That counts. That's part of their group play, right, Paul? Is that right? Mm-hmm. I mean, they lost 3-0, and I don't know if that's got to be as humbling as it possibly can be. They still have a lot of stars. Is it Megan Rapinoe, who's one of the mega stars for the team, talking about, you got to move past it. Now they got to go and have positive results in the next couple of matches, so they could find themselves gone. It's hard to imagine that. Just like what happened after the United States team lost a game or two in those exhibition games as well. All right, let's see. Now people are getting into whether teams have something outside of football. This is football driven. You can
this has nothing to do with anything. But I think they're probably, based on just glancing over there, they're talking about what programs, and maybe I'm wrong, but what programs would actually bring more to the table than just football, which of course, A&M has a good baseball program that helps them out. I know they're trying to turn things around in basketball as well, but looking at Texas, obviously baseball, all those Olympic sports that they win every year in the Big 12 with little to no competition. I mean, OU in gymnastics, you can go on and on, but again, it doesn't matter. You can be Stanford good in pretty much every sport, and this still comes back to money more than trophies and all that stuff.
All right. I have been, by the way, in touch with a couple of those in senior administration at Baylor. Nothing, again, you got to be, Oklahoma's released theirs, Texas. They're in the middle of this little dust bowl right now going on.
I would love to imagine Mac Rhodes is completely on vacation and has his phone turned off and everything. And then just at some point here in the next few minutes, he's going to pop that bad boy on and just...
His phone is on.
Just take it all in.
Believe me, he wishes it probably wasn't.
Probably not.
Yeah, that's absolutely the case. All right, here's one from Brandon, and then break, and then Paul's top five. We all know Mac Rhodes is not a pushover. He's tough, intentional, so he would work his tail off for Baylor to be in the best possible spot. And that's from Brandon on the YouTube channel as well. You have so many of you who have contacted us or been a part of it back and forth. Thank you.